Welcome to the Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin and today we're going inside the Los Angeles fires. But first, have you subscribed to Rock Fight's weekly newsletter? If not, you still got time before next week's edition to get the original Rock Fight content that we don't really put anywhere else, guys. Head to rockfight.co and click join the mailing list to sign up. If you're new around here, I keep asking you. You got to do it. You got to subscribe and join the Rock Fight by lobbing a little old bitty stone at the follow button on whatever podcast app you are listening to us on. Give us that 5-star rating. You know you want to. And hey, the Rock Fight Podcast Network is getting bigger. We have a new podcast. It's called Open Container. It's hosted by Doug Schnitzbahn, the legendary journalist Doug Schnitzbahn. It launches next Tuesday, January 21st. Go find that show and follow it so you don't miss it when it debuts. And all right, let's start the show.
The outdoors is not a niche. It's way bigger than that. The outdoors is essential to our lives, essential to who we are as a species. And as the world continues to get smaller, as new advances in technology push us to the limits of the planet, the outdoors is more important than ever. Open Container is here to explore this new idea of the outdoors. We'll strive to uncover stories about creativity, adventure, conservation, politics, and the people who make the outdoor space so vibrant. The world is full of anxiety right now. Climate change, politics, cultural upheaval. But fear not, there are answers in the outdoors. I'm Doug Schnitzbahn, and on this show, we will talk to people who are looking to nature to find the solutions we all need. We will be having honest conversations about how the outdoors can change us, how it heals us, how we learn from it, and how we can build a better world from what we learn about being outdoors. So please join us, open the container, and find out what's inside. Let's get some.
Open Container launches January 21st. Find and follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, everyone, before we get started, I need to tell you about our amazing teammates at Darby Communications. If you run an outdoor, an endurance, or an active lifestyle brand, there is no better PR or digital marketing belay partner or drinking buddy than Darby. They can help your business reach new heights, and they might just keep you from falling on your ass. I mean, since we started working with Darby, more and more people have been reaching out to us here at the Rock Fight because of that messaging. Look, guys, if they can help us, if they can help the Rock Fight, they can help anybody. Hit them up at darbycommunications.com. Do it today. So if you've been listening to the Rock Fight this week, I've been teasing my conversation with Andrea Kelly of Make Plus Equal, and I did speak to Andrea, and she was amazing. And you're going to get to hear that conversation, but not till next week, because we're pushing that episode to next week, because I had the opportunity, a last-minute opportunity to talk with outdoor journalist, author, and Los Angeles resident Shawnté Salabert about how things went down during the peak of the fire last week and how things are going now. You know, Shawnté is an incredible writer. She's also a returning champion here to the Rock Fight. And in addition to coordinating resources to help those in need in LA, she was also able to write an amazing piece that we featured in this week's edition of Rock Fight's newsletter. We also put it up on rockfight.co. She lives in Pasadena, right by the mouth of Eaton Canyon, where the Eaton fire is still burning today. Things are better there than they were, but that fire is still burning. But during our chat, Shawnté recaps her experience when things got bad last week, what seems to be lost from an outdoorsy perspective, and how things are shaping up now. So, okay, let's get into it. Welcome back to the Rock Fight, where today we're going inside the LA wildfires with Shawnté Salabert. Shawnté Salabert back on the Rock Fight. This was not planned. We were originally going to be running my conversation with Andrea Kelly of Make Plus Equal today. That's going to run next week now because we have the chance to talk to Shawnté. And Shawnté lives in Los Angeles. And, you know, if you've been paying attention to the world at all, you know that things are happening in Los Angeles over the last week or so. But welcome back to the show, Shawnté. I'm not happy about the circumstances that you're joining us, but I'm happy you're joining us.
Well, thanks, Colin. That is a cold comfort.
I know.
But it's nice to be back, I think.
Right? Hey, your city almost burned to the ground. You want to come on a podcast?
I'd love to. Sounds like a great time.
Good times. But you are safe. Your structure, your edifice is safe for the most part. You have escaped the worst of it, but you are surrounded by the worst of it. So that's we figured we wanted to have you come on and talk a little bit about it. And if you read our newsletter, listeners, and if you don't, you should. Yesterday's edition featured a column by Shawnté expressing her love for her home of over 20 years, which is Los Angeles. I'll put that up on the website in the next day or two as well, so people who didn't get it in the newsletter can see it. But today we just wanted, have you on the show, talk about what went down during the peak of the fire last week, and I guess how things are going now. So, take us back. And so the funny thing is, just again for the listeners, you and I were literally on a conference call Tuesday afternoon, having a good time, lots of cool stuff, talking rock fight stuff, outdoor stuff. And then it was the next day, and I saw your post on Instagram and realized, oh my God, I didn't even connect the dots of how close you probably were. So what happened, I get from your lens?
Well, yeah, it was pretty surreal. It remains pretty surreal a week later. So I lived in the city of LA for the better part of the last 20 years. And now I live in Pasadena, which people probably know for the Rose Bowl. And now, unfortunately, because of the Eaton fire, which is one of the two biggest fires that has been burning here. The other one is the Palisades fire, which is kind of directly west of here in the Santa Monica Mountains. So yeah, I had this, pretty chilled Tuesday last week for most of the day. Talked with you, had a nice time, did some work. And then I left my house probably about 6:00 p.m. to go take class 1 of a 6-week pottery course that I'm taking.
Oh,
and you know why I signed up for
wonderful.
this? I signed up for this pottery course, Colin, for a little stress relief. So...
Did you get to do the pottery first?
I did.
Oh, good. Okay.
I was doing the pottery, and it was like a 2-hour class. By the time I got there, I think I got back to my car maybe 9:15 or something like that. And when I pulled my phone out, I had, and I'm not exaggerating this number, I had 60 text messages.
Oh my
and
God.
you know what happens when you see that your phone shows 60 text messages is you start to freak out and look at them. And the text messages were everything from, are you okay? Are you evacuating? Where are you right now? A lot of where are you right nows. And I started to put the pieces together looking at some of the things my friends were texting. And they were saying that Eaton Canyon, which is one of my favorite outdoor, spots here in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, was on fire. And Eaton Canyon, as the crow flies, is less than 3 miles from my house. So I went into a full panic mode. Now, traditionally, fire likes to burn uphill. So when we get fires, and we've had fires here in the foothills, the fires go uphill. They start running up the ridge lines, running up the canyons. The difference last week is that we had just entered a period of absolutely ferocious Santa Ana winds. The winds that night were forecast in my area, and I'm not in a canyon. I'm in the flatlands. I'm in urban Pasadena, north of the 210. The wind that night got up to something like 80 miles an hour, and it was blowing. It was unbelievable, and it was blowing in a direct line from where the fire started to my neighborhood, like to my house.
Yeah.
And so I got in my car, and I'm absolutely freaked out. I'm trying to reply to some of my friends saying, "Hey, I was in a class. I'm so sorry I didn't see this." The fire sparked, I think, at just after 6:00. Like it was just after I left. Had I been home and had I been here, I would have, seen it, and I would have packed up. So I drove home. I'm driving up the 2 freeway. All I see is a line of lights going in the opposite direction. Not a comforting thing in the evening. And then I start to see red on the horizon. And as I get closer to home, I start to see the flames. And again, I'm a couple miles from where the fire ignited. I'm thinking, okay, it's going to run uphill. I'm not in the immediate path, but oh my God, everybody over there is. We're not talking about some like mountain enclave. We're talking about an urban area. We're talking about a dense urban area filled with homes, filled with, retirement communities, filled with apartments, filled with stores, filled with everything. Mm-hmm. And so I got home, I checked in with some neighbors. A lot of people were packing their cars as I got there. Some people had already left. A friend of mine offered me a place to go. So I grabbed my cat, put some things in bags. I got into my house, and I had a moment where I was like, wait a minute, is this going to be here? Like what people don't, I don't think a lot of people understand unless they see the videos or unless they've unfortunately experienced it. But with high winds, fire also makes its own wind. But the embers are the problem here. It's not like you're getting a wall of fire marching to your house. You are getting embers that sit on your roof and then light everything on fire.
Right.
I live in a 110-year-old wooden bungalow, in a courtyard full of 110-year-old wooden bungalows filled with really old trees, and a lot of schmutz. So more schmutz now. But so there's this moment of standing there and going, okay, am I overreacting? We don't have an evacuation order yet for my neighborhood. We did get a warning. Do I go? What do I do? And the winds were just so vicious that I thought, you know what, better safe than sorry.
Sure.
And I just looked around the house. I'm like, what do I grab? I grabbed my computer. I grabbed my files for a book I'm working on. I grabbed my backpack, which was still packed for my last backpacking trip. That's kind of expensive stuff.
It probably smelled great.
Oh yeah. It smells just like the outside. But yeah, so I went
thankfully you didn't unpack it. It's like, sweet, I got my kit.
Right? Glad I was lazy.
Yeah.
Lazy me wins this time. Yeah, so I grabbed it, and my thought process honestly was like, there's a lot of expensive shit in this bag. So
yeah, well, true.
I can get new socks, but I don't really want to buy a new Durston X-Mid. Like, let's just get this out of the house. Yeah. And so I went to my friend's house that night, and then she ended up chatting with one of her coworkers who ended up staying on the couch. I stayed in her a futon that she had in her office. And the three of us were just in shock basically all night, watching this thing rip through Altadena and then start to come into Pasadena where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Colin. It was, a week later, I still can't adequately describe how terrifying it was. And I know that I'm one of the lucky ones that didn't, like a friend of mine sent me a video. She returned home after helping her neighbors evacuate horses, after evacuating her pets, her llamas. She returned home and kind of like collapsed on her couch. The police woke her up by knocking on the door and were like, you have to leave now. Both of her neighbors' houses were engulfed in flames. She sent me a video. She was like so out of it that she didn't even register this was happening because she had just spent all these hours like evacuating everybody. It's the middle of the night. I didn't have to deal with that. That's something I can't even comprehend. And the trauma that people are going to be dealing with from all of this is extraordinary. I don't know when I will. Like, people keep asking me, do you feel okay? I'm not okay.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not. Well, because it's also not even over yet. I mean,
it's
right?
not even over yet.
Right. I mean, that's as this is happening, and I mean, I've heard of the Eaton Fire and heard some things going on in Pasadena, but obviously with the Palisades fire, like, by the way, while you're dealing with that, that's burning all the way down to the ocean, and just ripping through things over there. So I mean, I can imagine you were probably watching that happening while everything is happening in your backyard. So, not to kind of skip ahead, but like that is kind of the thing too. Is it's like hopefully we're through the worst of this. But there's no rain in the forecast. I mean, that'll bring its own problems when there is. But
yes,
even still, that is sort of the one thing we desperately need so that we're not in 6 months going, well, here comes another fire because everything's still dry.
Yep. It's super surreal. I came back the next day. So, of course, I decided to come back after things got worse because then I was like, well, shit, I better maybe go look really quick and take some more stuff with me.
Yeah, maybe really had a window, right, where you could still get into the house. And
I was like, I can still get in there. We're not mandatory yet. We were under the warning. But the winds were still crazy high the next day. And again, the wind pattern was like a direct funnel from where the fire was ignited to like my block.
It's kind of shocking that your house didn't burn, or your neighborhood just didn't burn, frankly.
We were very fortunate because I'd say the closest house to me that burnt was less than a mile away.
Wow.
I know friends up in that same part of the area that their house is one of very few that remains standing. That was also part of it. Like, there were areas in Altadena that were completely flattened, and then you'd have a block where a couple houses stood. And for various reasons, like a lot of it is luck and fortune. Some of it is like how people landscape and how they clean and clear debris out of anything from their yards to their eaves, their gutters. Like, having urban wildfires is so unprecedented. You have Paradise, of course, is the one I think most people think of. And then you can go back in history and see things like the Chicago fire and everything. But, to have large scale urban fires, it does not happen often enough that we were really, inclined to sort of be super proactive about it.
Right.
You get clear the brush from around your house and all that stuff is pretty common knowledge here. But a friend of mine, my friend Toru, who is an outdoor guide, climbing guide, backpacking guide, incredible wilderness instructor, who lives over here lost his home. And instead of posting about like what he lost, he started posting about the science behind why all these homes caught fire and thinking about things that nobody talks about, which is those things like leaves in your gutters.
Right.
But yeah, so the next day, I came back and things were still super bad. So I packed up some things and I ended up staying that day. And my cat was still at my friend's house, so I stayed and helped a few of my neighbors. We just started watering down people's roofs and houses, trying to get some of the downed debris. I had noticed that pretty much the entire top layer of my roof had sailed off in the night. So trying to gather all of those sticky little
so
shingles.
Wind damage did impact your house?
Oh, the wind damage was, it could have been a lot worse, but it's not great.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you stay and in those moments, you think a lot about community. And, people love to shit on LA, which I talked about a little bit in that piece I wrote. That piece is really stream of consciousness from the heart the other morning. But people really love to shit on LA. They like to sort of look at it as a place where, it's not outdoorsy at all. Look, the stuff I've gotten from the outdoor industry, like people in the industry in the past, is just so disappointing to me. It's small-minded. And, we're ringed by mountains here. We live in a basin. We have the transverse ranges, which are amazing, even though they keep burning up. We have the deserts. We have national parks. We have the ocean. We have all of this stuff. Great weather on top of it, generally. Right. But then we also have these incredible people. And I live in this little bungalow courtyard, and we all just look out for each other. And that's what we did that day. Is you look around, and even in the thick of everything, you're like, whoo, what's important here at the end of the day? It's people, and it's these relationships, and, stuff is stuff. It can be replaced. Sentimental stuff is harder. But, at the end of the day, when I left again, I was like, well, all right, my people are all okay. Okay in varying degrees. Like I said, none of us are going to be okay for a long time, I think.
Sure.
But
how could you be?
But yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned an urban wildfire. I mean, I remember when it was not that long ago when there was the fire in the Front Range in the town of Superior, just outside of Boulder, and a lot of homes were lost in that. And I remember that was really like, oh my God, these houses are burning, right? Because typically it is if there's a mountain community and some homes burn, it's like well, you kind of understand, and it's right. Tragic and terrible, and you feel for the people, but also it's like, well, that's what happens there.
Right. You're butting up against it. You're kind of taking your risk.
Yeah. You're like, you're accepting that, and we've talked about oh, should we get a house up in Big Bear or something like that? And it's just like eventually, and it's like, then the next thought is, well, it really could burn to the ground.
It could.
You don't think of, and this is why, I referenced, I think it was when I was talking with Justin the other day about how it's also why, when the hurricane hit New York City, and how it just flooded that entire part of the city. Hurricane Sandy, I guess it was about 10 years ago or whenever that was. And the same thing here. You just think some of these big cities you kind of feel are borderline impervious to this kind of thing. And I think that's what is the most shocking kind of piece of this, right? It's not just like, there was a wildfire in California. It was like how it all unfolded. It was just kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think we do. I think we look at cities, and especially these big, marquee cities like New York and LA and things like that. And you do tend to think like, they've gotten through so many wildfires, but really the wildfires we generally have are those ones in the hills. Yeah. And you will lose some houses, and those are high risk areas to build in. But people aren't thinking like I have 2 grocery stores I go to every Monday morning, and it's an Aldi and it's a grocery outlet. They're next to each other. Both of them burnt in the fire. The Bank of America I go to, burnt in the fire. The coffee shop, Cafe de Leche, that I love, burnt in the fire. The Ace Hardware, that's like the neighborhood hardware shop, burnt in the fire. Apartment buildings, people, this isn't just like a few fancy homes in a hill. This is city blocks, miles of city blocks. And the other thing I think people aren't understanding, and that is starting to maybe shock people, is realizing this isn't rich people. There's wealthy people that lost their homes, but we can feel bad for them too, because they're human beings that lost things. But this is also, Altadena has a very large Black community, and this is a community that goes back generations. This is a historic community, and these people have owned homes and passed them down generation to generation. And that's a huge deal in a place like this where everything is so expensive. And, you're already hearing about people being super predatory and being like, let me buy what remains of your land. Let me buy your pile of ashes. And it's so also shitty, but there's just so many complex layers to this fire. And, we're not even talking yet about sort of the outdoor aspect of it and the nature and the loss of that. But, from a human perspective, it's just deeply complicated. And I think it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around what actually happened here and that it's real. This is worse than your disaster movie. This is like actual human lives. And this isn't going to be a quick fix.
It's not, and I've heard some even people today talk about how another delayed, like the Oscar nominations were supposed to come out later this week, and they got delayed. And there's some other people saying that we should, they should push off or cancel this year's Oscars or the Grammys. I'm like, no, actually, I think we bring the attention. Like that's it. These are events that people like look to in LA, and like why wouldn't you put a lot of people on TV that people are interested in to talk about it, make it a fundraiser, how do you kind of like leverage those things that LA is known for, and, and bring some attention. And, frankly, looking ahead, like, well, the Olympics, I know there's gonna be a lot of chatter now probably in the next few months of like, oh no, it's like, no, there's your goal. LA is back. The Olympics are here. Like, that's what we have. Because otherwise, what are we doing? Like, you gotta look at it not in a, there's nothing positive coming out of this, but if you're looking ahead, it's like, what are the ways to kind of like, build towards something? But I mean, go ahead.
Oh, no. And I was going to say too, along with that, like, okay, Olympics 2028, like a lot of people right now are super activated. The fundraisers are insane. Like, that I started a Google Doc, and I started it just primarily for my friends who live out of town who were like, what can we do? And I'm like, well, here are some people that either I know directly or who are friends of friends, people in my community. That there's like over 100 people in that list now, and that's just scratches the surface.
We've been linking it in the show notes. I looked at it before we got on to see how big it's got. It's like, it's like almost 100 names on that now.
Yeah, and that's nothing. Like, I can't explain to you how small that is compared to what's been lost. But thinking about these long range things, like, sure, LA is like, whoa, let's get into the Olympics and do all this stuff. These people are going to have needs that go past this week and next week and next 100%. Month. This is long range. We're going to need long range help here. This is a major disaster. And, we've got an incoming administration that's not super keen on California, as it turns out. But, we're going to need people to sort of stick the course with us. And if you're going to get excited about the Olympics, also recognize that like the fabric of the city has changed because of this. That's something I'm still grappling with. 3 blocks down from my house at the end of my street, there's a water and mask distribution center, that the city is doing. Mm-hmm. And on the fence at that, on the sidewalk there, I saw it this morning for the first time. I left town. I came back last night super late. And on the fence, there's crosses pinned to the fence for every single person who lost their life that we know of. Like
that part's not over yet either.
That part's not over yet.
No.
Do you know how long it's going to take to go? There's things still burning in Altadena, like rubble, like the homes, there's gas lines, there's embers, like fires burn hot and they last for a long time. So there's it's going to continue to be worse and worse. So I just, I hope people don't forget about it. I hope people remember that folks are going to need stuff like once the shock wears off, oh my gosh, people are going to need things.
I mean, and that's kind of what I mean about bringing in some of the more long-term goals, and I mean that's a way to kind of leverage, keep the attention on what happened and how it can positively influence, like something like the Olympics could that positively impact like how people are made whole again or rebuild. Because I just I'm thinking of when I spoke to our friends at Darby and everything who are in Asheville after Hurricane Helene this fall, and we through the end of the year kept linking resources in the show notes and talking about it on the podcast. Partly because we all know the news cycle, right? Yeah. I mean, like, I already noticed even on Blue Sky, like LA Fire's not trending anymore, right? It's like, okay, well, we've moved
been there, done that.
That's right. And it's just like, and right probably at the time when you need the most help is when usually people start moving on with their day. So however we can continue to bring attention to it in a positive way, we absolutely should. I guess kind of moving a little bit towards the more outdoorsy side of it. Not that that's important right now, but it's also, you mentioned, Eaton Canyon being one of your favorite places to go. Is there, looking at the areas that burned, is there a favorite place you want to talk about? Kind of, or do you not? Or are you not ready for that yet?
No, I can. I mean, this is the reality. Like I said, I've been out of town. I already had a trip planned. I was going to cancel it. And I said, you know what? I need to leave just for my nervous system. It's smelling, and also for my body. I have mild asthma. I also have long COVID and some complications with that. And the air here is horrific. It's still bad.
Mm.
The AQI will look a lot better when you look at the little colorful dots, but there's the city has issued like a no leaf blower ordinance for right now, for instance, because there's lead in the air, there's arsenic in the air, there's other chemicals in the air that are like deeply dangerous to us, not just right now, but long term. Like this is stuff that could affect me for the rest of my life. So, you know, anyway, when I got back and I went to Home Depot this morning to rent some cleaning stuff and to buy a bunch of stuff that I can then just throw away, which I hate to do, but it's not safe to keep these things once I clean it. Right. I've thrown away stuff in my house. I was driving back and I looked up at the mountains for the first time and I wanted to cry. They're black, they're gray. There's lines of fire retardant. It burnt the whole, like if you think about, Denver, Boulder area, and you think about how people talk about the Front Range, right? Like this is our version of the Front Range is the San Gabriel Mountains and the Santa Monicas where the Palisade Fire burnt. If people who know LA or people who are from here will remember the station fire from back in 2009, that fire just burnt a massive swath of the Angeles National Forest, the San Gabriel Mountains. And it was not long after I'd only lived here a few years. I started hiking like all the time up there. I loved it. It was this close to the city getaway. You can be up in pine trees in 20 minutes from LA. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that. Mm-hmm. And so it was a respite. It was a way to sort of, balance city life, this kind of crazy, hectic, beautiful wildness of living in LA. And then you could go up into the crazy, beautiful wildness of the mountains. And that was all taken away from any of us who, use that as a respite. And that was almost 5 years that a lot of those areas were closed. They'll have to go in now and they'll do something called a burnt area. It's like burnt area, something report, burnt
you
area,
don't
emergency
know?
Response. Colin, as it turns out, I am not a wildland firefighter or a fire scientist.
There's an acronym.
Lady.
I didn't even know that. So
you're
already ahead of me.
I do. And I know it because when I was writing the PCT book, my Pacific Crest Trail book, right at the tail end of that book, the Blue Cut Fire, the Sand Fire, and then I forget the third one. There was about 100 miles of the PCT impacted by those fires before my book was due. So I had to get an extension. I went back into some of those areas that didn't burn very hot, but I learned about a bear report because this is
basically a terrible way to
get
a rewrite, by the way.
terrible, right?
Like,
I'm sorry.
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
gonna need some extra time.
It's no longer accurate.
I know I did have to tell my editor that. I was like, so there's these sections where I'm like, and then you're just going to take a break under a beautiful stand of pine trees. Just kidding. What a lie.
Well, you could have if you had done it earlier. Where were you then?
You should have thought ahead.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but that's how I learned about the bear report. And that basically, when they do those, they're basically assessing the soil. And they're like, hey, that's one of the components, but they're like, hey, how hot did it burn? Because that's how they learn, like, all right, are the plants going to come back? How long will it take? Are the trees donezo? Like, do we need to start essentially like red tagging them and saying like, these are dangerous, don't go under trees, or we're just going to close this area for a couple of years and see what happens.
I had it in our outline, like how permanent is this? Because you do, generally speaking, the vegetation rebounds pretty quickly in a lot of burn areas. Like when you kind of see like a few seasons on, years on, you're like, oh, you see the, the damage, but also all the new things that have grown in place. But I was wondering how that affected in the trail and how they evaluated that. Because, and we talked about it. Hikingguy.com did a video about what was burning. He's a big Southern California guy, and it said the Shawnté Flats. I think that it had just reopened after 4 years from the Bobcat fire. I think it was.
Yep.
In this past October, and I don't know if it got caught. Did it get burned again? Do we know?
So
I think
as far as I know, I think Shawnté was spared. The fire ran up to Mount Wilson. So Mount Wilson is just above Shawnté Flats. It's also the location of like most of LA's communications infrastructure.
There's like billions of dollars of antennas on it. So you got to think insane. They're like, not today, fire.
Not today, fire. Not today, Satan. And they did. They put. Luckily, by then the winds had died down enough that they started like the sound of helicopters was an absolute relief to the soul because you're like, oh my God, finally they're getting water onto the fire. They couldn't even put water on it. That's the thing too, is that you have these Santa Ana winds. It's super dry out here, and they couldn't do water drops.
It
Like the
vaporizes
fire
before it hits the
just
ground.
burnt. Yeah. So yeah, Shawnté, I think, knock on wood, is okay. I know the fire did run down one of the canyons. Hopefully it didn't burn. Like one of my friends that lost her place in the fire, in the Eaton fire in Altadena, has a small cabin that she bought, like a Forest Service cabin in the canyon there. So we're just hoping against hope that at least that survived.
Jeez.
But yeah, so that's the thing, is that this area, Shawnté just opened. People have been waiting years to get in there. That was one of the most popular areas. It's got some waterfalls, you asked for me what's going to be, essentially what's going to be the hardest for me. Within 10-minute drive, I can be on all these wonderful trails that I hike and I run. I use them to prepare for backpacking trips. One of the hikes that I was going to do last week was one of my favorites, and it's up to Henninger Flats, which is a cool little area with pine trees. There's an old fire service, like Forest Service fire station-y thing up there. It used to be a tree farm up there, campgrounds. And that's that. You can get there. You get there from Eaton Canyon or some of the other connecting trails. I cannot imagine that's going to open in the next few years.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine a lot of the stuff in the front country here that burnt is going to open in the next few years.
Yeah.
It's really devastating. Like when I think about that, and you could think like, yeah, Shawnté, you're talking about trails and people are losing their homes and people have lost their lives, and that's you can't. That's a somber reality check right there. But also, people need these places. We need these opportunities to connect to the natural world. We mourn for the animals. A lot of people, the Eaton Canyon Nature Center couldn't evacuate their animals. The animals all died when the Nature Center burnt down. Like, it's horrific to think about that. But these places are a balm for the soul. This is where Angelinos go to let off steam, to go to connect. People go do baptisms out there. It's a very religious place for a lot of people. And that part is going to be really hard to deal with. It's a big reason why I've stayed in LA all of these years, is because nature is here. It's right here. We can touch it, see it, feel it. Probably don't taste it, but you get out there. I get out every day. And right now it's not even safe to walk around my neighborhood. So yeah, that's going to be a hard thing to contend with, is how do you then recalibrate, all right, well, the Rose Bowl is still here. I can go walk around the Rose Bowl. The Arroyo is still here. I can go walk in the Arroyo, and you'll find those places. But to have so much of the mountains off limits again, is a hard thing to take, to be honest.
Well, and for the outdoor community listening, and I know I spoke a little bit about this on the Wednesday episode too, but it's if you respond to these kinds of stories and these tragedies, like if you did for Asheville or whatever, like for any other kind of stereotypical mountain community, this is the same. I mean, and that's kind of what I was getting at. Like people, and you mentioned earlier, like there's Southern California, most of the communities, especially Los Angeles, I experienced it down here in San Diego too. It's like being in a mountain town. Like, and look what you just described. You said you were living in sort of LA proper. You moved to a spot, so you had trail access. Why do most people move to the classic mountain towns? It's like trail access or to go skiing or whatever. By the way, I'm sure you're relatively close to skiing as well if you wanted to go skiing.
It's true.
And it's not great this year.
No, it's not.
Which is part of the problem. But I often think of that when I'm, because I'm in North County, San Diego, and it very much reminds me of when you cut through Park City and you're in that part of the Wasatch with the way the mountains look there, and they don't look like they do in like bigger little cottonwood canyons, right? They are more that sort of. It's like Deer Valley. Like there's relief, but there's also a little softer maybe than some of the more traditional Rocky Mountains in a way. The way they present, that's kind of what they look like around here, and they're everywhere. And no one really considers it. They think L.A., glitz and surf, or San Diego, like California burritos and surf. And they don't think about the fact that what is actually around here.
It's true.
So if you are considering any sort of outdoor tragedy that if you would donate to, if you would consider or speak out about or support, this should go on that list as well.
Yes. And to add to that, a couple, I can't remember what year it was, but so you got your REIs and all that and your big five sports and whatnot, but LA had a really special outdoor shop called Adventure 16. So,
They used to, yeah.
We used to.
Yeah.
We had the San Diego had one.
Mm-hmm.
And when they closed, we lost, I wrote a piece for Adventure Journal, and I talked about the fact that shop was such a good example of how LA was like a strange mountain town in a way, in that we would go there and you'd go see people's like slideshows about their adventures, and you'd talk to the guys there who knew everything about everything, and they could guide you to the right gear. I could buy mountaineering boots there, which I can't do in most places because nobody thinks women want to mountaineer.
Yeah. Right.
So but that place, like I wrote I think I called it like a elegy or something for an urban mountain shop, but it, like, that is such a great example of what, like, there's such a tight outdoor community here, and it's such an expansive outdoor community. Like, several of the people I know who lost their homes in the Eaton fire are outdoor leaders. They're outdoor guides. They take people to climb and hike, and they teach them skills. Like, one of my friends, Toru, that I'd mentioned earlier, he is a climbing instructor. He actually helped me learn how to, do anything he was like my number one guide for learning how to set up an anchor. And I was talking to him, and I'm like, he's going to need to rebuild all of his climbing gear and everything. And I'm going to give him actually my rack because I haven't used it in a while. And I've got like arthritis in my feet. And I'm like, you know what? You can actually use this. I'm just looking at it.
What happened to your feet, man?
Dude, it turns out when you climb and hike and stuff and you have a family history of arthritis, maybe you'll get it too. Cool.
No, but that's amazing. And that, think about that. Like this, and look, to your point with the loss of life and business and property, it is think about somebody's climbing rack as a small thing. But I mean, it's why, your friend lives where he lives. I mean, in the access.
It's what makes us human.
It makes it, and it's part of your identity. Like, so that's, even that small gesture is huge.
Yeah, it is. It's like we don't need to, we can feel the profound grief and the loss for the human life, for the animal life, for the plant life, for, people's homes and businesses and schools. Like the school where I used to teach the wilderness travel course, the Sierra Club class I used to teach, the school, 80% of it burnt. Like that school is not usable again. Multiple other schools burnt, synagogue burnt, like I said, my grocery stores burnt. But there's also all these things that make us human. Like somebody I know, a woman I know, posted a GoFundMe, and she talked about, she's like, really at the end of the day, the things I'm going to miss most are the sentimental things, like the creative things that I've lost. And, for somebody who's into the outdoors, and you've got this, for this example, a climbing rack that you've accumulated over a bazillion years. Sorry about that alarm. But for somebody who is outdoorsy, somebody who's a climber, a climbing rack could be a very sentimental thing. There's Absolutely. A few pieces I'm going to pull off and keep for myself. But the idea that, this is all part of being a human being. This is all part of what makes life enjoyable for us, is these things that bring us joy, these things that make us feel connected, these things that make us feel like we're part of a community. And I just keep thinking, I'm like, I know that, like, I'm watching the music industry right now just show up for each other. Like everybody, there's so many different organizations fundraising and doling out small micro grants and everything, helping people replace their instruments and their gear that they've lost, because a lot of people have. And this is from the marquee names that you're seeing in the news to like small, like there's a mom and pop, amazing percussive, like Black owned music shop that burnt in Altadena, to people who are casual musicians, people who are in touring bands, people who are studio musicians. I'm not seeing that from the outdoor community. And that, like, why isn't Black Diamond saying, hey, why isn't Patagonia saying, hey, like, I know my friend's local Patagonia store is going to talk about giving some clothes, but really, like, hey man, why can't we come together?
It's a good point. And I don't want to speak out of school if somebody has said something, but I mean, I'd like to hear from the Outdoor Industry Association. Anyone listening to this on the brand side, if you are planning to do something, please send it over to myrockfight@gmail.com. We can kind of start a list going on our website and talk about it, put it in the show notes of the pods as well. We're linking to Shawnté's resources, but we can link to others as well. And I would love to see how the community, I mean, look, this is part of the ethos of the outdoor industry and community anyway, regardless of how much you think or the LA is an outdoor town or think that it's not. It shouldn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Because as we've learned anything over the years is that there are outdoor enthusiasts and there's outdoor people and outdoor opportunities everywhere, regardless of the access or what you have access to in your community. So this is a national tragedy and maybe the worst natural disaster we've ever seen. And it's in the second largest city in the country. So please respond. And we're happy to help promote any efforts that you're making. And I'm going to start digging around. And if nobody's doing anything, well, you're going to hear about it from me too. So
yeah, Colin, that's right, man.
Well, come on. Let's go, outdoor industry.
Yeah. And I really do think, Colin, though, it's because the people don't think of this as being an outdoor town. And I really listen, there's enough outdoor brands here. And there's enough outdoor brands between here and down south and Ventura and everything that you guys can rally a bit. I don't just want to see a square on your Instagram, show up for people. Do you want me to compile a list of people that are going to need things? Because it's pretty extensive. So
it's not hard to figure out.
Let's hook it up. And,
don't send it to Sierra to sell. Send it into some folks who need it in the LA basin. I guess. All right. So really, we could wrap it up. But I guess so we put together you have the Google Doc going with 100 GoFundMes. We'll continue to find some other things we can link in the show notes as well. If we're assuming we're on the other side of the worst part of this, and without any rain in the forecast, like we said, rain's good and bad in this scenario because
rain is going to be
coming. But we really need the rain. We needed the rain well before this happened.
Yeah.
What now? Is it just day by day?
Right now, I think it's day by day. People like me are very fortunate. I've so far spent most of this day trying to clean the ash out of my house. Living in an old house, it gets in everywhere. And then the leaf blowers began. And so thankfully, those are verboten for the time being because they're just blowing more arsenic and lead into your home. But yeah, I think, the fires are still burning. It's going to take a while before people can get back to their homes that burnt or to see if their home is one of the few that are still standing in those areas. We're going to need long-term support. But the community is rallying together, and that's what we do best here. For all of the BS that people throw at LA in a lot of ways is just a bunch of tight-knit communities looking out for each other because nobody else will. So we got us, we got each other. And I think that's what you're going to continue to see is we're going to keep an eye on the literal sky and, hope for rain, but also be pretty nervous about it because that is going to meet slides. This whole area is one big slope. I'm at the bottom of it, so not exciting about that. But, all we can do is wait and see. And in the meantime, try to take care of each other as best we can.
All right. Well, and with that, I guess we'll wrap it up. I think like I said, in the show notes, we mentioned it multiple times, look at Shawnté's Google Doc. We'll continue to find some other resources. It sounds like a lot of places now are starting to refuse physical donations. It's more like money is what is needed more than anything. And we'll have to, I guess, keep checking in as things progress here. And hopefully next time you're on, you're like, oh my God, we are rebuilt. We are back. And it took a week.
I wish, Colin. I wish.
I know.
As one of my friends says, from your lips to God's ears. So try to make that happen.
Well, thank you so much for making some time. I know it's been a traumatic 7 days, but I guess it's been about a week now, right? Or a little over a week.
A week or 10 years. It's hard to say.
I know. But thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. And thanks to anyone who listens and decides to chip in and do what you can, even just amplify that link that Colin's going to share, any of the GoFundMes. Really the best thing to do right now is give money. Just give money, give it locally. So if you're going to give to a big national organization, World Central Kitchen does amazing work here, abroad, and around other disasters around the United States. They're actively feeding people at several different areas here in my community. Okay. But really, check out the resources that exist. There's a ton of ways to give if you don't want to give to GoFundMes. But money, and volunteering if you're local.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Colin.
All right, that's our show for today. Big thanks to my guest, Shawnté Salabert, one of my favorite people in the world. I'm so glad she took a few minutes to come hang out with us, and wish her the best. Please send your feedback on this and every episode of The Rock Fight by sending an email to myrockfight@gmail.com. Please support those in need in Los Angeles by clicking the links in the show notes, the ones that Shawnté put together, or any other way that's helping those in need in Los Angeles. Please support those folks. The Rock Fight is a production of Rockfight LLC. I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. Back again to take us out. It's Krista Makes with the Rock Fight song. We'll see you next time, Rock Fighters.